Hello again. Hope you're having a wonderful day. We are reading in the book of Matthew. Pardon me while I adjust my mic here just a little bit. We're reading in the book of Matthew, chapter 22. Again, we're reading to understand what's being said, the context of what's being said, and the events that are occurring, to understand those, to understand what's going on, and then to learn what we can from that and apply that to ourselves. So this is the book of Matthew, and we're starting chapter 22, and I want to read the first, this is a sizable parable here, the first 14 verses. Now, remember, from where we last left off, Jesus is still speaking to the chief priests and the Pharisees, the elders of the temple. And again, Jesus spoke to them in parables, saying, "The kingdom of heaven may be compared to a king who gave a wedding feast for his son, and sent his servants to call those who were invited to the wedding feast, but they would not come. Again he sent other servants, saying, 'Tell those who are invited, see, I have prepared my dinner, my oxen and my fat calves have been slaughtered, and everything is ready. Come to the wedding feast.' But they paid no attention and went off, one to his farm, another to his business, while the rest seized his servants, treated them shamefully, and killed them." Here again, he is referring partly to his prophets here, and how they had been treated. Pardon me. So going to continue on in verse 7. "The king was angry, and he sent his troops and destroyed those murderers and burned their city. Then he said to his servants, 'The wedding feast is ready, but those invited were not worthy. Go therefore to the main roads and invite to the wedding feast as many as you find.'" Now let me move this down here. Alright. "And those servants went out into the roads and gathered all whom they found, both bad and good. So the wedding hall was filled with guests. But when the king came in to look at the guests, he saw there a man who had no wedding garment. And he said to him, 'Friend, how did you get in here without a wedding garment?' And he was speechless. Then the king said to the attendants, 'Bind him hand and foot, and cast him into the outer darkness. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth, for many are called, but few are chosen.'" So, here, this parable, the kingdom of heaven, may be compared to a king who gave a wedding feast for his son. Well, God is calling all of us. God was calling all of them, all of the Israelites. Here they had been, they had abused and treated his prophets horribly and killed them. But he was still calling them to him. And since they would not come to him, since they would not turn to him, and he's speaking to these chief priests and scribes. I do not want to say that all of Israel or that all the Jews had quit worshiping God. That is not, I don't think that is intended to be the point. But those, especially in power, had. And even today, you can't say that, because there are a lot of Jews who are still worshiping God in the Jewish tradition. So, again, so he sent other servants, and he kept, he was trying to get them to come to him and to turn to him. And since they would not, he went elsewhere, and that's how this is again, pointing out that the Gentiles would be brought in their place and in their stead. But then there is this where he come in and there's one guy there who's not in a wedding garment, and he's like, "How did he get in here?" And the guy didn't have anything to say, because he had basically snuck in or tricked his way in, or however you want to say it. And that's representative of some people who are not are not part of. They're just trying to sneak in and just try to slip in, and they're not really one of the chosen. They're not really doing and following God and Jesus. They have kind of slipped in with everybody else, hoping they would get away with it, So there's a bit of a cautionary tale there with that as well. For many are called, but few are chosen. And it's like the two gates. There's the wide and the narrow gate, and the narrow gate is difficult, and few will find it. That's sad to think about, but God is calling for everyone, and He's offering everyone the same opportunities and the same chances. So we would really like for everyone to find the narrow way and the narrow gate. And that's what we would want, because that's what God would want. But He won't force you to do it. He won't force anyone to do it. It has to be your decision. It has to be everyone. Everyone has to make that decision. That's just the way it is. Otherwise, He could have just made robots. If we have to do everything a certain way, then He could have just made robots, and there would be no need for us to be real people and to be thinking creatures or anything like that. So, alright, so moving on, verses 15 through 22. Then the Pharisees went and plotted how to entangle Him in His talk. Now notice, He's still been speaking to the Pharisees and those, and now they want to try to trick Him or trap Him. And they sent their disciples to Him along with the Herodians, saying, Teacher, we know that you are true and teach the way of God truthfully, and you do not care about anyone's opinion, for you are not swayed by appearances. Tell us then what you think. Is it lawful to pay taxes to Caesar or not? But Jesus, aware of their malice, said, Why put me to the test, you hypocrites? Show me the coin for the tax. And they brought Him a denarius. And Jesus said to them, Whose likeness and inscription is this? They said, Caesar's. Then He said to them, Therefore render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's. When they heard it, they marveled, and they left Him and went away. So, you'll notice first they're trying to butter Him up. First the Pharisees go away and they kind of scheme and they try to plan, and then they send their disciples to Him along with the Herodians, saying, Teacher, we know you are true and teach the way of God truthfully, and you do not care about anyone's opinion, for you are not swayed by appearances. So they butter Him up. They try to appeal to His vanity, but Jesus is not a vain person. Jesus is not that way, so you can't just butter Him up and get what you want out of Him. So, but that's the term I know best, is you're buttering someone up, you're flattering them. But He knew what they were up to. He knew they were trying to trick Him, and so the coin, the tax, and all that, we should pay what we're supposed to pay and do what we're supposed to do. We are supposed to follow the law of the land. We're supposed to live peaceably with everyone, and that means that we should follow those things, because that helps society and that helps things run smoothly. So, and that's why He says, therefore render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, which is just earthly goods. Earthly wealth is pretty meaningless in the long run. So that's what that's all about. Alright, and instead, render to God the things that are God's, which, as He has spoken many times over, is mercy and forgiveness and love. So, we're moving on to verses 23, and we're going to read down through 33. The same day Sadducees came to him, who say that there is, now this is the Sadducees, they say that there is no resurrection, and they asked him a question, saying, Teacher, Moses said, if a man dies having no children, his brother must marry the widow and raise up children for his brother. Now there were 7 brothers among us. They first married and died, and having no children left his wife to his brother. So too the second and third down to the 7th. After them all the woman died. In the resurrection therefore of the 7, whose wife will she be? For they all had her. Now they're also trying to trick him, and you got to remember the Sadducees, they don't believe in the resurrection. So, they're trying to trick him with a question about something that they just don't believe in. But Jesus answered them, You are wrong, because you know neither the Scriptures nor the power of God. For in the resurrection they neither marry nor are given in marriage, but are like angels in heaven. And as for the resurrection of the dead, have you not read what was said to you by God? I am the God of Abraham, and the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. He is not God of the dead, but of the living. And when the crowd heard it, they were astonished at his teaching. So he is telling them that he is God of the living. So, of course, there's a resurrection. There's not, he's trying to correct them in their thinking. I don't know how well they would receive that, but nonetheless, he's trying to correct their way of thinking and their belief, which was incorrect and does not go with the Scriptures that they were supposed to be following. But somehow, I don't know how the Sadducees had come to that point, but they just did not believe that there was a resurrection. All right, so let's see, verses 34, we're going to read down to 40. And I apologize again. I mess this up sometimes, and I forget to scroll us along. Okay. But when the Pharisees heard that he had silenced the Sadducees, they gathered together, and one of them, a lawyer, asked him a question to test him. Teacher, which is the great commandment in the law? And he said to them, You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the great and first commandment. And a second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these 2 commandments depend all the law and the prophets. So here Jesus is telling them, I guess they thought they were going to trick him. This doesn't seem like much of a trick, if you know what I mean, because, Jesus answered them right off. Of course, he understood the Scriptures, and he had known the Scriptures, and so he told them, and these 2 are the great, together these are the commandment. This is how we should be living, and if you follow these 2 things, well, if you love the Lord your God with all your heart and your soul and your mind, you will be trying to follow him. You will be reading his word and learning more about him and how to be, and then you shall love your neighbor as yourself. You will treat others as you should treat them. And you shall treat them with grace and mercy like God does. So, on these 2 commandments depend all the law and the prophets. They're all based off of that. Because you would not commit any of the bad things or, break any of the 10 commandments if you were following these. So, I think that's pretty simple, and it's kind of a surprising thing that he answered them quickly and simply, and I guess they had no rebuttal for that. Alright, let's move on, verse 41 through the end of the chapter. Now while the Pharisees were gathered together, Jesus asked them a question, saying, What do you think about the Christ, the Messiah? Whose son is he? They said to him, The son of David. He said to them, How is it then that David in the Spirit calls him Lord, saying, The Lord said to my Lord, Sit at my right hand until I put your enemies under your feet? If then David calls him Lord, how is he his son? And no one was able to answer him a word, nor from that day did anyone dare ask him any more questions. And it's pretty simple that Jesus is trying to tell them, or he's trying to get them to look at the scriptures and what they're expecting of the Messiah, and to realize that the Lord and the Messiah, Jesus, the Christ, is not what they were thinking of. He can't just be a son of David. He can't just be another Moses, another human. He has to be more than that. And that's what he's trying to call to their attention. He's the Son of God, and he is more than just another person, another Israelite, or another Jewish person, or another prophet. And they obviously didn't know how to answer him, and they did not. Again, they were worried that if they were wrong, if they gave him too much credit or too much, that or if they acknowledged his authority and his legitimacy, that it would undermine their authority and their legitimacy. So that was a big deal to them, that they maintained their place in society and in the temple, and as part of the chief priests and the rulers of the temple. So thank you for listening again, and I hope you have a good day. God bless you.